Let's open up in prayer. To God, we thank you for the day, and we thank you for this opportunity we can gather together as fellow believers, that we have the privilege of opening up your word and seeing what happened in the Old Testament and how we can learn from what our predecessors went through, the experiences they had. You show your providence through different things that they went through, and we thank you for that, and just help us to learn from it. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so let's turn to Exodus. Exodus chapter 1. Turning a corner, going from Genesis to Exodus, going to start looking into the life of Moses, a person that God used mightily, and he come from very humble beginnings, and we're going to see how God protected him all throughout his life, at least up through until he brought the people out of Egypt. So I think on your handout there, the key idea, it sums it up pretty well there, where it says, God protected Moses from Pharaoh's command to kill all the Hebrew baby boys by causing him to be adopted by Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the palace. But Moses chose to be identified with the Hebrew people. He killed an Egyptian, then fled to Midian. That pretty well sums up the story we're going to talk about, but we're going to get into a little bit more detail. So let's read Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 14. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and all kinds of work in the field. And in all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So as we transition out of Genesis and the book of Exodus, we have been tracing the promise of a seed that God had given Eve, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the Egyptians oppressed the people of Israel, and part of that is because Joseph was a good guy, and now then a new Pharaoh came in, and he didn't act anything like Joseph did. So rather than enjoying the favor the Israelites had under the time of Joseph, they were now threatened. The new Pharaoh was afraid that they would rise up and overthrow his leadership if war broke out. Rather than seeking to win their favor, he chose to enslave them. So how did this fulfill a promise made by God? Anyone remember? Let's go back to Genesis chapter 15, where he's talking to Abraham. Genesis 15, 12 through 16, which says, As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and they will be servants there, and they will be afflicted 400 years. And I will bring judgment on the nations, and they will serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So this was talked about way back in Abraham's time, what's going to happen to the children of Israel. Excuse me. Let's see here. So in a form of oppression, the king ordered the Hebrew wives to kill all the baby boys. Why the boys and not the girls, you think? Pardon? Oh, okay, a little bit stronger than women. Maybe they were, go ahead. Okay. Boys could be in the military. They could fight, all right? And maybe another reason is that the boys could push back a little bit harder. Maybe the girls would be more suppressive and oppressive, so to speak. So if they got rid of the boys, then Pharaoh knew that he could keep the Israelites under control. But when this didn't work, he ordered all the baby boys to be thrown into the Nile. But Pharaoh was determined to keep the Israelites weak so they would not rebel, but God had other plans. He would come back to the account of the, we will come back to the account of the wives and the activity in your homework. So, all right, let's go to talk about the birth of Moses, and Exodus 2, 1 through 10. All right, now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife as a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when he saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. While young women walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. And she took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." All right, so who were the parents of the child from this passage? Does it say? No, it doesn't say who Moses' parents were, but let's look at Numbers 26:59. Numbers 26:59. Numbers 26:59. The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt, and she bore to Amram Aaron and Moses and Miriam, their sister. So it's Amram and Jochebed, I think I said that right, were Moses' parents. When the woman had her son, what did she do? Hid him from the Egyptians for how long? 3 months. I wonder if there's a significance to 3 months, because the passage talks about that she could hide him no longer. Was he too loud when he cried? I just think about that kind of stuff, like why 3 months? It doesn't really matter how long it was, but it's just interesting that it was for a specific period of time. And why did she hide him? Other than he was her son. What does it say? He was special. I think that she knew that he was going to do great things, and that she needed to save him. But back in the New Testament, it talks about this, that he was fine. So you don't have to turn there. I'll just read it from Acts 7:20, which says, "At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight, and he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house." And then in Hebrews 11:23, it says, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because he saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. All right. So how do these passages in Acts and Hebrews add to this passage? What do they affirm? Pardon? Okay, true. That's exactly right. But these affirm that Moses was a beautiful child and add that his parents were not afraid of the king's edict. So, what did she do to keep the baby safe? Put it in a basket and put it in the river. She made a basket of bulrushes that would float and coated the basket with tar and pitch to keep it from sinking. Where did she place the baby? In the Nile, but specifically, I thought this was interesting. Was it a coincidence that she placed the basket near where someone in the royal court would find it? In amongst the reeds is not in rushing water. It's by still water. So it's not like in the Ten Commandments, those of you have seen the show The Ten Commandments, I think they put it, it shows her putting the basket in the river and she pushes it along and it kind of floats down. Then all of a sudden, Pharaoh's daughter finds it. But it was in the bulrushes or in the reeds, and that's still water. That's not running water. So I think she was very specific. Okay, let's put this in a spot where someone in the royal court could find it. But if you think about that, that could go both ways. What if the Pharaoh, or whoever found it, seeing that it was a Hebrew child, and they knew that he needed to be killed, or he should have been killed, but he wasn't. But fortunately, and it's through God's providence, that the Pharaoh's daughter saved him. So I just thought that was interesting. All right, so who watched over the basket? Who pushed the basket out there? His sister, okay? And her sister's name is Miriam, as we saw in a previous passage. So who discovered the basket? Pharaoh's daughter, but she sent one of her hirelings out there to get it. So what did she notice about the baby? He was beautiful, but then what nationality was he? He was Hebrew, and found out and saw that, hey, he should have been killed. But in historical data, it says that this particular Pharaoh did not have any sons. He only had daughters. So in order for someone to succeed him, then his daughter had to have a son. But for whatever reason, we don't know if her daughter or his daughter was married or what, but it just talks about his daughter taking the baby. All right. And how did she respond to finding the baby? She took pity on him, presumably knowing he should have been killed. So what did, Miriam was near there, and she's seen all this happen. And so the two got together somehow, and then what did Miriam suggest that the Pharaoh's daughter do with the baby? Find a nurse. I didn't really phrase that very well. She mentioned that, hey, this is a nursing child. Let's find someone that can take over, and let's have someone nurse him. And the Pharaoh's daughter said yes. And Miriam, she said, who do you know that could do that? Oh, by chance. My own mother can do this exactly. So Moses and his mother was reunited, and for a little while, she raised him until she was probably weaned. It was an extended period of time that she had him, but then as historical data talks about maybe about 2 or 3 years old when the child was weaned. Okay, then they brought her back to Pharaoh's daughter, and she raised him as an Egyptian. So That's a good question. Right, exactly. I guess you know when some babies are pretty and some babies aren't, but you don't tell about the ones that aren't. You just say, "Oh, how precious." So, but that's a really good question, Cheryl. I don't know. I mean, I would think from the way the text states, she didn't really have a lot of interaction with him while he was being weaned. You know, it's just that, okay, you take care of him, and then when time comes, I don't have to deal with diapers or anything like that anymore. Bring him back, and I'll take over. So, mm-hmm. Okay, right, sure. That kind of makes sense. Like I said, the Bible doesn't talk about any of that specifically, but historical data will probably reinforce that if something like this happened, that there would be some interaction between the two of them. But all right, so when Moses was taken to the princess after he grew older, we are not given a specific age. It could be around the age 2 or 3 after he was weaned, or even later. Jewish tradition holds that he was named Jehoiakim at his circumcision. So how was Moses treated after he left his mother and got to the royal court? How was he treated? Very, very well. Yeah, he was a son of, or a grandson of Pharaoh. So he was received as the son of Pharaoh's daughter, adopted into the royal court. All right. And Acts talks about this, how he was treated. I thought was just affirms what we already know. In Acts 7, 17 through 20. Acts 17, Acts 7, 17 through 25, or 22. But at the time of the promise drew near, God had granted to Abraham the people increased and multiplied in Egypt until there arose over Egypt another king who did not know Joseph. He dealt shrewdly with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants so that he could not be kept alive. At this time Moses was born. He was beautiful in God's sight, and he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. And when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in words and deed. So he had a pretty privileged life, coming from being a Hebrew and being adopted into to Pharaoh's family. He was very privileged. All right. So as we move on through the text, we don't learn a lot about Moses, how he was raised. So from 2 until he was, what age was he whenever we now learn about Moses and what he did with killing the man? How old was he? Does anyone know? 40. So from 2 to 40, we have no idea. Well, we have a pretty good idea, but there's no details of what his life was like, but we can just imagine. So Exodus 2, 11 through 25. One day when Moses had grown up, when he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together, and he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" He answered, "Who made you prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. Then Pharaoh heard of it. He sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the daughter of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home to their father, Reuel said, how is it that you have come home so soon today? They said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. He said to his daughters, then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man and gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. All right. Did Moses know that he was not born an Egyptian? What phrase talks about this in verse 11? What words tell us that he did or didn't? Yes, family, his people, exactly. So he knew at some point that he was not an Egyptian by birth. So, and we already talked about that he was 40 years old when he fled to Midian. So what did Moses see as he went out on this day? Beating, yes. An Egyptian beating one of his fellow brothers. And he did not like it. He didn't like it so much, so what did he do? He killed him. So I don't know if he had anger management problems or it just kind of ticked him off, or it just in that moment he didn't like it, and so he killed him. And so what did he do to cover up his crime? Buried him in the sand. Unbeknownst to him, the murder did not go unnoticed. Before he had killed the Egyptian, he had looked both ways, and he had not seen anyone, so he had thought he had not been seen, but he had. How long did it take for his crime to be known? The next day. So yeah, not too much time had elapsed. How did the Hebrews know about the murder? Yeah, it doesn't really talk exactly how it happened, but the text doesn't say explicitly, but either one of the struggling Hebrews had been witness or news of the murder and had already been spread to the Hebrew community. So how did the 2 Hebrews respond to Moses? Okay, so that happened. Then the next day, Moses saw these 2 guys arguing, and he tried to get in between them to, I guess, remedy the situation or ask them why they were arguing. So how did the 2 Hebrews respond to Moses to attempt to break up their fight? Right. Why do you think they were so negative? Yeah. Just put yourself in that situation. Why do you think that they acted the way that they did to Moses? He what? Okay. All right. So who are you to judge us? Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You would think that he would try to protect him, but all of a sudden he wants him dead. He sure. Right. That could be. But Moses wasn't going to take that chance because he got out of there. He left. So what did the Hebrew man ask? He asked Moses if he intended to kill him as he did the Egyptian, and that was an aha moment for Moses. After hearing that question, he knew he had been exposed, and he was going to get out of there. And like we talked about before, you guys had mentioned, how did Pharaoh respond to hearing Moses' crime? He sought to kill Moses. And what did Moses do? Where did he flee to? The land of Midian, which is about 200 miles away. The text doesn't say why he chose Midian. It really doesn't matter. But it was quite a ways away. So we pick up the story that he's in Midian and he's at this well and he meets the daughters of Reuel who were trying to water their father's flocks. And how did Moses serve the women? What did he do? Right, there was some other shepherds there harassing the women, and Moses saw that, and so he saved them and ran them off, took care of them, and so that the women could water their flock pretty quickly. Excuse me. So as the text says, the father asked, "Why are you home so early?" And they said, "Well, this guy helped us water our flocks pretty quickly." And he said, "Well, where's he at? Why didn't you bring him home? Invite him here." And so they invited Moses to stay. And how is Reuel described? What is his profession? Or maybe not his profession, but what was he? He was a priest of Midian. Whether this reference is to a priest of God is unclear, although he may have known the true worship of God as he was from Abraham's line. In Exodus 18, he praised God and offered a burnt offering. And as in the case of Melchizedek, there were worshipers of God in various places. So we're assuming that since he was from Abraham in his line, that he knew who the true God was. So after he ate with them, did Moses move on? No. He stayed there and married his daughter Zipporah. During this time, all this was happening. Pharaoh, whom Moses fled from, had died, and the Israelites were crying to God for rescue because they were just being so oppressed, and they asked God to help them. And did God hear them? Yes, God did hear them. How did he respond to their cries? Well, he remembered the covenant that he had made with Abraham, saying that, hey, some of my people, they're going to be oppressed, and they're going to be in slavery for a while, but I will have a plan to rescue them. God knew the situation and the promises that he made, so he had made a plan to help them. It wasn't Moses' plan at first. I mean, Moses tried to do things on his own in order to save his people, but that wasn't what God had in mind. What attributes of God do we see displayed in this account? How can you know? How should I word this? What attributes of God do you see in this whole account? His providence, exactly. His omniscience, he knows everything. God knows what is happening to his people and demonstrating his omniscience. We still see him allowing the Israelites to be enslaved, but he's going to be faithful to his early promise by bringing them out. So as we think about Moses' life so far, we can see God's hand on him. He protected him for 3 months from the Egyptians. He was protected in the river while he awaited discovery by Moses' daughter. He was protected by her order to have his mother raise him. He was protected within the courts of Pharaoh for 40 years. So that's pretty amazing. We know that God protected him because he knew he had a plan for him to eventually bring the Israelites out of Egypt. So God's plan to free his people and give them the land of promise, to show his faithfulness and grace to a people who did not deserve it. What does that remind you of? Giving us something that we don't deserve. What did God do for us? Pardon? Grace. He saved us. So just like the Israelites, who really didn't deserve to be, at first they did, but then as time went on, they really didn't deserve to be rescued because of all the stuff, all the pushback that they had for God. But it's just an example of God saving us. We didn't deserve to be saved. It's only by his grace that we are here, that we are his children, and we need to thank him every day for that and live our lives accordingly to thank him for that. So anything that stands out from this passage that it's like, wow, I've always thought about this, or a question? I may not be able to answer that, but at least we can bring it before the crowd. Yeah, go ahead. It's the same, yeah. I didn't mention that, but yeah, he called two different things, but they're the same individual. Anything else that stands out, Karen? At the burning bush? That's his first real encounter with God, wasn't it? Was that That's a good question. I never thought about that. It doesn't say, because he was raised an Egyptian, so he would not have known the ways of God. If anything, his mother wouldn't have known, but he was too young. So God works in mysterious ways, Pardon? Well, true. That's a good point. Since he was so sympathetic to the Hebrews, then he may have been hanging out with them and knowing something. But yeah, the text doesn't say that, okay, at this point, he believed. It just doesn't. So, anything else? Yes. Probably, yeah. But knowing God, like he was raised Egyptian, which I'm not negating what you're saying, but he was raised Egyptian, so he would not have known the ways of the Lord all that well. Well, true, yeah, like Robert was saying, but not until he was older. Yeah. So, Pat. Mm-hmm. You lost it. Probably, but then he left for some reason. He left for whatever reason. But that says that he wasn't afraid of what the king would do to him. Is that what it said? Hebrews what? 11:27. Hello? Yeah. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, so he endured as seeing him who is invisible? That's a good question. But then back there in Exodus, it says that he fled for his life. So, right, right. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little, probably so. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, who are you to judge us? Paul. True. All right. Okay. 10:22. Second service needs to come in. So appreciate all the questions, all the feedback, all the dialogue. So we'll see you. I'll be back in a couple of weeks.